You're about to meet the innovators and influencers who are restoring the Judeo-Christian foundations of our culture right here on The Patrick Coffin Show.
And now, here's your host, Patrick Coffin.
Welcome indeed to The Patrick Coffin Show. Today we'll be delving into two controversial areas at the same time: manliness and Catholicism. When you put those two together, frankly, the resulting hybrid can be extremely triggering for the uninitiated. So per the intro at the top of the show, I welcome Adam Minihan and David Niles, the founding co-hosts of the magnificent podcast, The Catholic Man Show. Adam is the vice president of a Tulsa radio station named for a certain archangel who was engaged in booting the devil out of heaven. David Niles is another Romanist type with a penchant for explaining the why behind the what of our holy faith founded by the Son of God. We welcome David Niles and Adam Minihan to The Patrick Coffin Show. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here.
I went zero dark manly. I got the zoot suit thing with the black dress shirt, and except for my headgear, I could have maybe pulled off a new one, fedora.
A new fedora,
Yeah,
huh?
this is the summer, bordering on Panama, frankly, but still within the fedora protocol.
There you
template. So
I think it's a good look. It looks good.
Thanks. It's perpetual summer here in Southern California, so you can't just have the one winter fedora.
So way to rub that in.
What's that?
I said, way to rub that one in.
Well, actually, today the temperature plummeted below 50. I'm serious.
Oh.
Yeah, one of the three the jacuzzi jets wasn't working properly. So it's been, we just white knuckle it, you know?
I feel you.
I'll pray for you.
I feel good that you can't punch me in the face right now because the distance is too great. You had me on your show, and it was a blast and an honor. I love your template. I love the three things that you set up to talk about each time. Not only does it make it easier show prep because you're doing the same thing, but the guests contribute so many different angles and types, and we'll get into the template of the Catholic Man Show. I just wanted to know how you thought this up. I mean, you guys were both working away in beautiful Tulsa. Adam, you're the VP of St. Michael Radio. How did this, why, right off the bat, why the Catholic Man Show?
So don't you think that every guy has had this like time period where they were like with a bunch of guys sitting by the campfire and they have this conversation through the night, and at the very end of the night they go, we should have recorded that. That was awesome.
It's totally true.
Right? I think every guy has had that moment in their life. And Dave and I are part of many shows, a part of many groups, and we get together and have a manly beverage, and we talk about theology or philosophy. And so one day I go in and I go, Dave was actually planning this other show that he was going to do solo, and I knew he was about to do it. He actually bought the equipment to do it himself. And so I went in there and I was like, I'm going to be able to convince him to do my show. I said, Dave, listen, we're going to do a show, and we're going to do exactly what we've always talked about doing, recording just a regular show topic, manly topic, and have some fun.
Yeah, and history will show which show made it on air and which one didn't. I was going to do one about vocations in our diocese. But another thing, kind of one of the driving forces behind why would we take conversations like these and make them into a radio show was that a lot of the Catholic radio programming, especially during the day, a lot of it seemed to be geared more towards women than men.
Indubitable, undeniable.
Right, and so I would say one of the most popular ones is a show that you're well familiar with was Catholic Answers Live.
It does ring a bell.
A man
doesn't ring a bell, does it?
Yeah.
No, it does. It's vaguely. It's there.
Maybe in another life. But anyway, so that was probably one of the manlier shows. Well, probably the manliest show was Bear Wozniak's show. I mean, when you got a guy named Bear.
Yeah, and he does this.
Right.
Yep.
But anyway, we just felt like we needed more programming that was geared towards men, designed to get them engaged in their faith life. And so we decided to build a show around man stuff and highlight virtue. That's kind of if I could sum up our show in one word, it would be virtue.
Well, I'm a big, actually medium-sized. Let me put that a different way. I'm a an avid fan of etymology, word origins, and as you may know, the root of vir is the Latin word. The root. That's not even a word, Patrick. The word vir in Latin is the root for virtue, and that's the Latin word for man. So manly and virtue are natural and maybe even preternatural cousins. All right, let me ask you this, just on the level of definition. How does the Catholic man show different from the Methodist man show or the atheist man show or just the man show? What's the distinctive part of the Catholic adjective that modifies the subject man? What is unique about being a Catholic man, and why bother inculcating that particular thing? Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. And I think that's a great question, because that makes a huge difference. If you think of, in fact, I know that there was an old TV show called The Man Show. And if you were to go and watch it, which I don't recommend, but I'll just tell you, it's a lot different from what we have on our show.
Is this the Adam Carolla thing?
Yes.
Oh, and Jimmy Kimmel maybe?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
better named The Boy Show.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
It just feeds into what are those primal urges. There's no self-control. It's just indulge in all the basal things that I want as a man. And so, but everybody knows there's more to being a real man than just indulging in the desires of the flesh. And the Catholic part, I think that's really where it comes into, is taking the powers of manhood and harnessing them. And that is when you get actual control. Actual power comes from being able to moderate the things that, these gifts, these urges, strength, power, all of the things that you associate with men. And it's only when you can rein them in, so to speak, with virtue, that you can actually get anything out of them, and you have real power. Sure.
I'm sure you've both had the experience of reading an author, and all of a sudden what to someone else would be a normal sentence, it just kind of jumps off the page. It's a flaming arrow of truth. I was reading The Way by St. Jose Maria Escriva once, and it just...
I call that the meme generator.
Oh, yeah,
he
that's
writes
great.
The memes.
He does, yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, he kind of foresaw the meme-sized morsel of truth. And at one point he says, get used to saying the word no. So the comfortability with the word no is the key to virtue. And we can all say yes to anything. Yes is very easy, and yes is never involves any kind of self-mastery. But no, I mean, that seems to be a distinguishing Rubicon that the man of virtue is not going to cross, because he knows if he begins to say yes here, and then the dam begins to break, and then what does he have? He has the same chaos he had before he came to Christ.
Absolutely.
Yeah, or even being able to say no to another person. It's a lot harder than saying yes to another person. But if you know where you need to be, if this is the line I'm walking as a man, and I should not stray from it, if that no becomes very important. I think a lot of people throughout life kind of reach that point sometimes where they've overcommitted themselves, and they've got to, maybe cut a few things out because it's getting in the way of family time or whatever. And that no becomes very important.
To that I say no, but over to you, Adam. No, that's important, because sometimes, in fact, there's a book in the 70s called When I Say No, I Feel Guilty. I know that sometimes there's a wince that comes along with saying no, because it's a good thing that you're saying no to. It would be helpful for people if you would say yes to it. But sometimes for the sake of your own ordered calendar, you have to say no. And I think there's an art to it. Dave, just to follow up on you a little bit, is there an art? And if so, how do you practice it? Letting someone down gently, like, hey, can you speak at St. such and such parish next week? No stipend, but it's all for the kingdom of God. Well, when you've got a family and you've got mouths to feed, you can't say yes to all good things. Is it just a matter of practicing that kind of gentle, direct mix? Because a lot of people are not good at saying no. to offers like
Oh
that?
yeah, sure. And I think a great place to start would be learn to say no to yourself. You know, you've got to be able to say no in your own life. Can you moderate your own appetite? Can you, you know, regulate the amount of social media you use every day? Just whatever it is. If you can't say no to yourself, if you don't practice moderation in your own life, then it's going to be a lot harder to say no to somebody else.
What sort of things can people say no to? Just to kind of strengthen that will muscle, if you will.
Well, I would say sin would be a really good thing. It's a really good place to start. Yeah.
Number one, sin.
From our bulging obviously file.
But yeah, I think one would definitely be, this is a clear-cut case. I think every man can either has related or continually relates to this, and that's pornography. That's one that you should absolutely cut out. You know, chastity is hard. And that's chastity is a virtue. And the reason why it's manly is because it is hard. It's easy to, you know, that's kind of like men are really geared towards like feminism right now, which is what, as Thomas Aquinas says, the unwillingness to put down the pleasure to do something that's hard. Well, there's this instant pleasure, this instant gratification of pornography, but the hard thing is chastity. And so you have to work on this virtue constantly and deny yourself and deny this pleasure for that sake. So chastity was my first thing, but that's probably a bigger thing than what you're really looking for.
Yeah, and you know, I think every man.
Yeah, go ahead.
Every man should be fasting. I think that if you're a man, you should have fasting should be part of your life. If you're a Catholic man, especially, you know, you can find something to fast for. You know, it's just another form of prayer. It's a type of prayer that not only is efficacious in the way it works on, you know, the object for which you're making a sacrifice, but it works on you big time. That's just another, you know, training the will for me. And, you know, probably a lot of men, we tend to be creatures of appetite of a variety of forms. So learning to curb that appetite. Yeah. I mean, Adam, you were talking about, you know, sexual life. I think that if you look at a man whose sexual life is just all over the place, inevitably his appetite for food will also be all over the place. Those two things just seem to be very linked. So, but even if that's not the case for you, learning to fast, that it just really strengthens your will across the board.
And regulate your prayer life. You know, if you're not getting up in the morning, the first thing you're doing is ordering your day towards God. If you're not praying, getting on your knees immediately, you know, making sure that you're praying with your family before meals, at the end of the day, making sure that you're praying the rosary with your family. I think those are easy ways to start.
And the Bible calls prayer a sacrifice of praise, right? Not reading a magazine in a hammock. So it abrades against your natural laziness to stop everything you're doing and put yourself in the presence of God. So it's something that people, when they go to work out, they're fine with that. They lace up their shoes and they're on their way, whether or not they feel like it. Whereas when it comes to prayer, we're like, oh, look at the time. We're not supposed to be heroes about it. I think I'll put it off till tomorrow and so on. But back to fasting for a second. I'm very interested in fasting because our Lord describes fasting when he needs to trundle in the big guns, right? When there's someone oppressed by an evil spirit, that can only be driven out by prayer and fasting. He doesn't say by more intense prayer or by more prayers, prayer and fasting. And what is fasting? Well, fasting, I mean, traditionally understood, it's saying no to ordinary nourishment. So to fast from chocolate, I mean, what a joke. How Lent has been reduced to meaninglessness. You shouldn't really be eating a lot of chocolate anyway. So fasting, I've been pondering this for a while. When you say no to food, you are putting a bridle on the thing that feeds you and promotes your good. And food is to the individual what sex is to the race. So it seems to me there's a big overlap between saying no to food as a way of training your will and remaining chaste, because the sexual impulse is good and God is a genius, and he wasn't a dummy when he gave it to us. We're supposed to have sexual desires for the opposite sex, but when we put a bridle on it, when we put up guardrails, that's when our strength becomes stronger. Because the people have the stereotype, right? Oh, Catholics are prudes, or we just we're into suppression of natural desires. But really, we don't think that way when it comes to winning an Olympic medal. Look at all the things that an athlete has to say no to have a shot at maybe getting to a trial where maybe he'll get into a pre-Olympic team.
And a lot of those are good things. He may have had to say no to other sports that he was good at to focus on that one.
That's right. That's right. And then you have those strange geniuses who are the exception. The Deion Sanderses and apparently Michael Jordan.
Bo Jacksons and
Michael Jordan's a scratch golfer. I'm also a scratch golfer, and then I woke up. It's weird.
I identify as a scratch golfer.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'm sure you gentlemen have followed the snowflake phenomenon and safe spaces on college campuses. And it's just so sad to me to compare an 18-year-old soldier who's willing to jump off a boat into enemy fire and storm Normandy Beach, whereas today, the same demographic need a cruelty-free quinoa smoothie because someone might say a hurtful word that makes them feel bad. Just masculinity is so debased now.
Yeah, I mean, they worry about things like microaggressions. Like, what the heck is a microaggression, and why do you care about it? It's just like how sensitive. Exactly what you were saying. I had a conversation about a year ago with an elderly gentleman, and we were talking about how 18-year-olds today, nobody expects anything out of them. That, oh, well, they're just kids. What are they supposed to do? They're helpless, And he said, when I was 18, I was the captain of a gunship leading a raid. No, 18-year-olds, they can do a lot. Why is it that kids these days still act like they're 10, like they have no responsibilities? And I think it gets back to virtue again. They've been raised with a lack of them. There's a lack of responsibility. Maybe it's just
work ethic. They're soft.
I don't know. I'm not an expert at all, but
soft is like the masculine equivalent of lukewarm, isn't it? You're God's barf.
Yeah, it's just effeminacy is everywhere.
Yeah. Well, the Prime Minister of Canada, my home and native land, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, proud male feminist, says it constantly. And it doesn't resonate with men who are into this self-sacrificial servant leadership. It's that language of virtue signaling and wanting to get on board with every politically correct bromide. It's certainly not drawing men into the church. You were mentioning earlier about the proportion between men and women as far as Catholic programming goes. If you go to any Catholic church, through the week or on Sunday, it's going to be about 60-40, 70-30, right, proportion, women over men. Adam, let me ask you a question that might put you on the spot a little bit, because you're like me, are a serious Catholic, and you're a broadcaster and a communicator. How complicit is the church in a sort of a default way responsible for this lack of masculinity in the way that the church extends adolescence? You go to World Youth Day, you're going to see people in their late 30s. World Youth Day. Right. It seems like not only are 18-year-olds kids, but 28-year-olds are kind of treated kid-like. There's like no invitation or challenge to get it on with it. Marry the girl. Stop dating. Marry the girl. Step up and commit. Because it seems like the crisis of masculinity is tied to a crisis of commitment.
That's exactly right. And I think, as men, we thrive on challenge. We thrive on competition. And so if you're not challenging these guys, then why would they want to do it? And so a great example, that Dave and I were actually talking about just the other day. There's this group here in Tulsa, and there's like 3 levels into the group. It's like the first apprentice group, and then there's a second group and the third group. But they always say, oh, but the second and third group you can get done in the same day. You can be elevated to the third group basically in the same day. And it's like, well, that doesn't make me want to do it. It's easy. That means anybody can do it. Yeah. And that doesn't make me want to do it. So I think you have to challenge these guys. I mean, like you were just saying, 100 years ago, if you were 18, you were either expected to be marrying somebody or going off to college. And now, we hope that these guys can tie their shoes correctly.
or starting a business. How many businesses were begun by men in their early 20s?
That's right.
Days gone by.
That's right.
David, how much has contraception and the attitude that gave rise to it been a huge game changer in terms of how men see themselves and how they see women?
Oh my gosh. How much time do you have?
8 hours.
Yeah, I mean, that is a huge topic. I mean, look at all of the cultural things that have happened in the last 10 years. You know, the last 10 years have been kind of crazy in just the cultural norms that have changed. You know, when you look at gay marriage, in my opinion, contraception is the primary mover in the gay marriage result. Because when you sterilize the sexual union between men and women, what is the difference between sexual union between two men or two women? Well, not a whole lot, really.
Yeah, the logic is inexorable. If you're willing to sterilize an otherwise fertile act, then how can you argue against sexual behavior involving any coupling with anyone or no one?
And why should a man now have to take responsibility for his actions if there are no consequences? And I don't even like phrasing it that way. I don't like calling children a consequence, but they are a consequence in just a natural consequence. You know, these are just the natural progression of things. And, you know, it doesn't matter what it is. I have a 2-year-old at home, and that's, you know, one of the things we're working on. You know, discipline in general is she needs to learn there are natural consequences when you do things. If A, then B. Yeah. And that's one of the big things. When you remove those consequences, well, then you shouldn't regulate the behavior because, you know, and now it's just essentially a leisure activity. So, yeah.
Well,
anyway.
I'm just remembering my own daughters when they were that age, and I'm thinking of, I'm sure you're familiar with Reverend Billy Graham. To me, maybe the greatest Protestant preacher of the 20th century.
Sure.
I'm trying to connect with his son Franklin Graham, who's to a large extent keeping his dad's, you know, message alive, which is the gospel, of course. But Billy Graham always seemed not only very human and very real, but willing to go places where today's preachers don't go. And one of the places he went was the Jack Parr show in 1961, I think. He was on Jack Parr with, I think it was the episode that Muhammad Ali and Liberace were on. So it was a real crazy mishmash. And in talking to Jack Parr, I mean, can you imagine Jimmy Kimmel allowing Rick Warren or just name any Christian leader? Almost impossible to think of, right?
Yeah.
Billy Graham was talking about, he didn't use the phrase original sin, but he was saying that, you know, we have this idea out there that man is good, we're naturally good, and we're just kind of a little bit flawed. And he said the Bible is very clear that we are sinners from the beginning. And he didn't use the Catholic Anthropology, but he said, think of it, you don't need to teach a child how to be bad. You have to train a child to be good, because we're all, from the very beginning, you don't need lessons in temper tantrums and, you know, complete meltdowns. No, you need children don't naturally say thank you. What do parents say, right? What do you say? Thank you.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's true. So
I've often wondered if Jesus was ornery as a toddler. You know, did he go through the terrible twos? I just don't know. Someday I'll find out.
You will find out. If you find out from me, will you somehow channel it? No, that would be.
I will.
That might be wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe Adam can be your oracle. Yeah. Well, he certainly, I mean, that's one of those endlessly fascinating questions, along with, you know, did Adam and Eve have belly buttons? Farting, pre-fall farting. Can we go there? I just
did. It's your show.
Good question.
Yeah. Would it be like flowers?
Maybe. I'll bet it was. I'll bet it was nice.
Yeah.
I like the passage that throws me a loop every time I encounter it, and that's Jesus is 12, and his mom and foster father were worried for 3 days, and where is he? And they go back, and he let them stay in that angst, didn't he? Almost like he's drawing from them another layer of trust in his plan, even though he's only 12. He's amazing the doctors and the teachers in the temple. I just think it's a testament to the trust that he had obviously in his mother, but also in his foster father. Let me skip, since we're onto this. I want to talk about St. Joseph for a minute. St. Joseph is the foster father of Jesus Christ. He's the guardian of the Redeemer in that great document by John Paul II, the Great. I think bad art has destroyed, or at least undermined, devotion to St. Joseph. Talk a little bit, maybe start with you, David, on how St. Joseph really is the guy that the Heavenly Father dispatched to be the bodyguard and security detail for the Holy Family. Now, if you've been to Israel, as I have, those are pretty dark, twisty roads. You want someone who looks more like an MMF fighter or like Russell Crowe more than Sir Ian McKellen. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Joseph is so frail and so old, and he's got those flowers, and I'm waiting for him to keel over right out of the icon. You know?
Yeah, and just, he's the ultimate strong silent type. Not just silent, but he's the strong silent type. And there's some debate, I know, on how old he was exactly. I think there's a couple traditions. Either he was a widower at the time when he was betrothed to Mary, or he wasn't. But
well, it could have been a young widower.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true. I suppose that was probably more common back then. But yeah, he had to be a decision maker as well, because I think if I had a weird dream, I wouldn't wake up and just change my whole life.
Yeah.
I'd take a discernment process, like, well, I did eat some spicy food last night, maybe that had something to do with it. But also for him to be leading Mary and Jesus, and you're the one in charge. You've got Mary and Jesus behind you, but whatever you say, Joseph, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
That takes a man to be able to lead those who, may be greater than you, but because you need to be the leader, God, like, wouldn't you second guess every decision you made? I just don't know if this is right, but that would be tough.
Yeah,
tough.
Strong. Yeah, he goes through the New Testament not saying a word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but he's teaching Jesus, every day being a carpenter. Like, carpentry is not easy work. That's tough work, and frustrating work, especially if you're not good at it, like myself. But for the first 30 years, Jesus was a carpenter, and he learned that from his dad. And so, how many things that these days are we supposed to be teaching our kids that are carrying on? I think it's a great example.
When I lead pilgrimages to the Holy Land, one of the things I discovered is that the Greek word tekton that the gospel writers use for carpenter, a tekton is a stoneworker. And I hope you do, if you haven't gone yet to the Holy Land, to Nazareth, you'll see how few trees there are. I think Western, European-based art has made Joseph into a kind of voompa with the hammer and the nails and the saw with the wood, right, and the table. And they would have had there were wooden tools, and there was certainly wood there. But usually for home building and for large-scale projects, it would have been stone cutting, which is extra heavy stuff. Requires even more depths of manliness because of the hours involved and just the sheer heavy lifting. Let me recommend an actor for you. His name's Mark Price, markprice.com. He's from Alpine, Shakespearean training, and he does one-man shows that are really high quality. And I remember Mark did a performance as St. Joseph. He does these shows in which he doesn't know I'm mentioning this. In fact, I don't really know him personally, but I was impressed with his presentation. And they're soliloquies, so the audience is hearing his thoughts, okay? So his one-man show on Joseph, the topic begins to turn to his death before our Lord's death. And he kind of becomes emotional as he's getting it across that it took him a while to get over his anger when he realized he's not probably going to be there for Jesus when he really needs him. But I'd never pondered the reason why. After the incident in the temple, we don't hear from Joseph again. And Mark's speech in this play explains it this way, that the Heavenly Father knew that Joseph would never permit the arrest. He would have stepped in.
He would have
totally.
He would have said, yeah.
It would have been a very disastrous, you know, because he knows how close Joseph is to his son, and it would have been, you know, more of a, it just would have been a massive distraction, and things could have gone terribly wrong,
Okay,
obviously. And I thought that was
men are
beautiful.
protectors.
Right,
Yeah,
men are protectors, right, hardwired to protect.
Right.
And so,
especially when it's the innocent involved. I mean,
Right,
you look at
exactly
Mary.
right.
You know, it says he was a righteous man and wasn't even going to. You know, he could have legitimately, publicly humiliated her, according to the laws of the time. It's like, hey, you're pregnant. You know, we're married, and that is not my baby. But he didn't do that. You know, knowing her to be a good, innocent woman. So yeah, no doubt he would have done the same for Jesus.
Why do you think so few men want to talk about masculinity as anything to do with being a warrior? We seem to have domesticated what it is to be a man, where the Christian man is called to be a really nice guy, kind of like a non-purple wearing Barney, or kind of a Mr. Rogers, where nice guy and full stop. But we're at war. True or false? We're at war.
True.
True, absolutely.
100% true. I keep my sword in my left pocket all the time.
Are you
got it?
Are you going to haul out your spiritual weapon? I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what we say around here. Kids, pick up your weapons.
that's right.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But it doesn't surprise me in a world that worries about microaggressions, like we mentioned earlier, that, the idea of being a warrior, that's aggressive language. You know, we don't want to do that. That's just not nice. But yeah, the truth is, the Christian is a man who makes no exceptions for sin, who calls a sin, and sometimes that's going to upset people. But, you know, that's not really our fault that it's going to upset some people. There are going to be some people who just maybe need to have their feathers ruffled a little bit. Now, you know, of course, you should always do it patiently and lovingly, but that doesn't mean in any moment that you ever acquiesce the truth.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and what is it? What is a man, Patrick? It's, you know, you're dying to oneself. That's not, a lot of times that's not fun. You know, that's hard. And so if you're requiring other people to do that, again, they have to put down their own pleasures to die to self for others. That's not a lot of fun to a lot of people.
True or false quiz? Just one question. True or false? Feminism is partly as a result of men getting an F in masculinity.
True.
True.
Absolutely.
I like this game.
Yeah, this is fun because I got a 50% chance of getting it right.
Yeah, no, it's totally true.
Working the odds.
And you know what? This is another thing that could go back to birth control. There have been many studies done on the effects of birth control on a woman's body and the way it changes what she looks for in a mate. There was a particular test that was known as the T-shirt test, where they had men wear a T-shirt for a day or a period of time, and then they had these women smell the T-shirt and decide
pheromones, right?
Right, yeah. So they were just, the only thing they had to go by was the smell of this man. Who is the most attractive? And then they would look at, you know, how well genetically do these two people pair together? And the way birth control works, this is, you know, without going too deep into it, but it basically makes a woman's body think she's pregnant. When a woman becomes pregnant, the type of pheromones that she's attracted to switches. So instead of being attracted to a complementary set of pheromones, so a mate that complements her own DNA, she's now attracted to identical type pheromones. The reason being because now she's pregnant, she needs to be nesting. So she's attracted to her family. You know, that's the identical type pheromones. She wants to be with the other women. So women who are on birth control out there looking for a mate actually are looking for someone who does not complement them very well. And it's just a genetic result of, you know, taking birth control when you shouldn't be doing that.
This reminds me of a joke, and I never really tied it to contraception, but we've all seen women, and we may have had female friends who are just dating Mr. Wrong, right? And she can't see it, that this is the wrong guy, bad news. Run for the hills, don't walk. And it's a quick story. You'll appreciate this. It's a woman who is entranced by the giant gorilla at the city zoo, and every day she visits this gorilla, and it's this kind of grumpy-looking but august creature. And every day she brings him a peanut, and she's not really supposed to. And one day she shows up, and the gorilla is asleep against the bars of his cage, and she knows she's not supposed to. There's a sign that says, don't touch the gorilla. She reaches in and starts stroking his fur on his back, and in a nanosecond, the gorilla grabs her by the wrist and tries to force her through the bars, and he bends the bars a bit and squeezes her in and starts thrashing her. And everyone starts screaming, and the zookeeper comes out, and he puts, he loads up his rifle, and he puts 2 tranquilizer darts in the beast, and finally he keels over, and the woman is a mess. They bring in the medevac helicopters, and she's whisked away to ICU, and she spends 2 weeks recovering, and finally she's all bandaged up, and her best friend comes to visit her. She's finally out of intensive care, and her friend comes in, and she's very emotional because you can just see her eye in this sea of bandages. And her friend says, "Honey, you look awful. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Anything I can do for you?" And she says, "There's one thing that's the worst in the world." "What is it? What is it?" "He doesn't call. He doesn't write." Just that blindness to, you see the damage that's being done here? But no, sometimes, people, they're more clever than wise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when men don't take on what they're supposed to do, somebody has to pick up that slack. And so women have to do it, and now they're doing 2 jobs. Now they're doing the man's job and the woman's job, and that's system overload, and that puts a lot of pressure on them, and so that causes them to have to feel like that they have to do more.
Tell me about the guests that you have on the Catholic Man Show.
Well, we have a lot of different guests. We've actually been able to find a lot of high-quality people to come speak just here locally. Mm-hmm. But we've also had a number of people that I think most people would recognize, people like Carlo Broussard,
Patrick Coffin.
Yeah. And
we have a guest speaker that comes in, our guest show host, Sam Guzman from the Catholic Gentleman.
Right on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he's awesome. He actually just moved to Oklahoma a couple months ago, and he lives out there by the Clear Creek Abbey. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're familiar with Clear Creek, but he lives right out there, so it's only about a little over an hour away.
Yeah. Yep.
And so about once a month he comes on with us as well, and he's a lot of fun to talk to.
And my man Miley?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I was gonna even say hi. Like I had like this really cool thing that I was gonna say to tell him, but now it's blown. I blew it.
He came into town because they were doing a show here.
By the way, for folks who don't know about Rival Sons, the hottest band in America, they just finished. Yes.
If you want to find out more about him, you can watch the episode where he came on the Patrick Coffin show.
Yes.
It's a fantastic. I love listening to him because he's so excited about being Catholic.
He gets pumped.
You can just hear it.
Rebel inside. He's like a wheel within a wheel. A rebel within an industry of rebellion.
Right. Yeah. So. No kidding. But he was coming into Tulsa, and I was so excited because we're gonna meet Mike Miley. This is gonna be awesome. He's gonna be on the show. I was listening to Rival Sons nonstop all week. Yeah. And then my wife went and had a baby. Like the day we were supposed to record, and I didn't even get to meet him.
Yeah, so I just had to, take that on for him. So he came on the show, and I got a chance to go out and have some tacos and some beer with him, and we actually even went to the Catholic gift and bookstore here locally, and he went in and bought a new rosary and scapular and I don't know, $100 worth of stuff in there.
I think he lost his luggage or something.
Yeah, they lost his luggage, so he went and had to make sure he had his rosary for his show. Which is awesome.
Vintage Mike. Just a note of consolation, David. Don't worry. You can meet the baby later. Really. Plenty of time. All right. So thecatholicmanshow.com. Mm-hmm. By the way, let me compliment you on your social media graphics. I'm so jealous. Your retro thing, your styly. No, it's like, it doesn't even, forget that you've got the witty subtitles and themes that 40s and 50s look. It so fits what you're doing. So guys, thanks for being a gift. It's a much needed audio content experience, thecatholicmanshow.com. Check it out, as I always do. And gentlemen, it's been an honor.
Thank you.
Thank
Likewise.
you. Yeah, thanks for having us on.
We'll be in touch. Godspeed. Be a saint. What else is there?
What else is there? Cheers to Jesus.
All right, the winning side. Just raise my Lefroy 10-year, of course. All right, this is the Patrick Coffin Show.